Welcome to Living from the Heart. I am your host, Tina Thrussell, light dancer, co-founder of Best You Can Be, and messenger of the Shin, the Way of the Heart. Today, I am delighted to have Sarah Ross as my guest. Sarah is the co-founder of Your Reason to Breathe. And in 2014, she had a very interesting experience that really transformed her life. And it is an experience of the heart. And I'm delighted to have Sarah on the show with me today to talk about that and what living from the heart means to her. And just before I bring Sarah on screen, I'd like to draw your attention to the little crawler at the bottom of the screen. It is offering you a complimentary subscription to Heart and Mind Matters, which is an inspirational article, YouTube video, quote of the week that goes out every other Tuesday morning. And if you'd like to know more about the Shin philosophy of living from your heart, you can visit shindao.com. So without further ado, I introduce you to Sarah Ross, co-founder of Your Reason to Breathe. I was saying Your Reason to Believe, but it's that too, isn't it?
Yeah. We'll take that.
Welcome, Sarah, all the way from the UK.
That's right. Good evening.
Technology is so amazing that we can be halfway across the world and still be connected, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it still kind of blows my mind that it's like talking to somebody in the next room.
It's so cool. So my experience has been that this half hour flies by. So I'm going to just jump right in and say, tell us about what happened in 2014. What was the big circumstance for you?
So I had, for a couple of years before the end of 2014, so Christmas 2014, been burning out at work. I was struggling with migraines 25 days a month. I was in a really bad place, mentally, spiritually, physically, and eventually took a severance package from work to give myself time to think, time to decide what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, burnout, depression, I was in a very negative place and left thinking, you know what, I've just failed at my dream job. I failed, in business, and therefore, it would be a lot easier for everybody if they just didn't have to worry about me. And so I actually chose the date on which I was going to kill myself.
Wow.
And I call it my expiry date. And, I'm a very left brain oriented. So as long as I had this plan and was doing things to, towards that, it made life just that little bit easier. And so you're like, you know what, this is maybe exactly what's supposed to happen. But it was several months in the future. I was like, I have this pile of money from my severance package. I'm going to go and do the things on my bucket list that I've always wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
And one of those was to go and volunteer. And so I ended up in an orphanage for disabled children in Vietnam. And in the end, I spent 4 months with them.
Wow.
And I can't tell you what happened in the first 2 months. I don't remember much. I don't really have any memories of that time. But for some reason, I decided that my last Christmas on Earth should be as Santa Claus. And so, I'm 5'10", quite a big girl. I couldn't even buy trousers and a t-shirt in the market because I'm just too big, too tall, too big. And yet when I went down Christmas Street in Hanoi, the capital, there was a Santa costume my size.
Oh, wow.
Everything, trousers, jacket, beard, wig, the lot. And I hadn't been able to zip anything up in Vietnam. And so here, putting on this Santa jacket was like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And I spent the day handing out sweets and chocolates and giving 180 orphans hugs, laughs, pulled my beard. I spent the afternoon with some war veterans who remembered Father Christmas from when the Americans had been in Vietnam. But, even the staff said some of them hadn't smiled or talked in years. But when Father Christmas, Santa Claus walked through the door, suddenly it was like they came to life. And so I don't speak Vietnamese, but we still managed over tea and biscuits and bananas to, spend a couple of hours with these people. And at the end of the day, they told us that one of the little girls was very sick and wasn't expected to make it through the night. And so we should say our goodbyes. And so I went into a room in the orphanage that I had never been in before. I was usually in room 5. She was in room 1. I hadn't really been in that part of the orphanage, but something told me to go and say goodbye. And I leant over this crib, and she kind of raised her hand, put it in my beard, and I watched her breathe. And she's 4 or 5. She's been deathly ill her whole life. Mm-hmm. And it suddenly struck me that she was fighting for every single breath, and she had absolutely nothing to fight for. Her family had abandoned her because she was sick. She was dying. She was never going to have been educated, even if she had been, just physically disabled. She would never have had those opportunities. And I was educated, family, healthy, traveling halfway around the world. And it suddenly hit me that there was a reason for me to be here. Mm. And I breathed with her for a while. And when I left that room, I was probably breathing deeper than I had breathed in months, maybe longer. And so, that night, I then went back to my room. And I was like, well, what do I do now? My whole plan was that in 5 weeks' time, there would be no more. And I had one book and one business card in my room that night. And it was from a gentleman in LA who, when I had first met him, had said he would help me make my dreams come true. And of course, I wasn't in a place for that to mean anything when I met him. But suddenly I'm sat in my room with this card. You're like, well, maybe I'm supposed to ask him for help, because I didn't want my parents to know. I didn't want my family to know how much I was struggling, that I had even been thinking about taking my own life. And you're like, okay, maybe this is the final test. If I ask him for help and he says no, then it was the universe testing me. Did I really want to end everything? And if he says yes, then I'll deal with that if he says yes.
Wow. So,
he said yes. He said yes. And it was funny because when I first met him, I didn't particularly like him. He works with some of the top LA film stars, and he encouraged me to come to his acting classes. And over sort of the first 6 months, it went from really, I hated him. I'll be quite open. Why I had to ask him for help, I do not know. But 6 months later, when I was healed sufficiently to tell that story like I just told you, that was when I found my reason to breathe. Was my story, my journey will help somebody never get to the place that I did, never have to choose that date. And therefore, that's why I had gone through the healing process with him. That's why my healing was completely out of my comfort zone. He had me singing on stage in Rome, doing stand-up comedy in London, all based on my own story. All these things were completely out of my comfort zone, but he is a big proponent of everything has to come from the heart.
Yep. Well, you got immersed in the living from the heart philosophy in a big way.
Yeah.
I just have to say, Katerina Barger, oh dear, I did it. Sorry, Katerina, is watching, and she said hearts. And then when I said wow, she went, wow is right. It's like, holy, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and looking back on it now, it's 5 years ago since I left for Vietnam. for that trip. What those acting classes and what those lessons that he took me through actually allowed me to experience was dreaming. I was surrounded in class by actors and actresses who will do anything to get one audition in front of a casting director. They will work 3 horrible jobs just so that they can have the freedom to go to auditions or castings. And I was from the corporate world. Like, nobody dreams in the corporate world. You have a goal. I want to be CFO. I want to be head of the company. But nobody's got that passion around the dreaming part.
And that's what, that's it, right? The dream is connected to having passion, to feeling like there's some life in life.
Yes. Yeah.
And you said that helped you find your reason to breathe. But honestly, that moment when that little girl reached for that sound beard and she was breathing despite no reason, that was understanding that there is a reason to breathe for everyone, and you really need to tap into what that is. And how many people have to hit rock bottom like you did to have that happen? I don't know. There are a few. Does it have to be that way for everyone? Can we wake up and smell the coffee before life gets that dire?
Exactly. And that was the part of setting up your reason to breathe, was to say, it doesn't matter whether you dream of being in a corporate job for the rest of your life or whether, you have some other calling. It's your reason to breathe. Before I went to Vietnam, I did not understand the whole Simon Sinek start with why. And, people would say, when you find your why, everything becomes easy. I was like, that's just ridiculous. Surely it's what and how. Like, don't even think about why. And then, of course, it hits you like, once I had my reason to breathe, suddenly things started to make sense and I would make decisions differently. And so, it is important.
So there's the story behind your reason to breathe, but what really is your reason to breathe? What's the core of what you've come to now?
So my mission, so I have 2 missions. One is to eradicate burnout in the workplace. I believe if we have bigger conversations, better conversations, I would have plenty of work with burnout prevention, but I wouldn't have to work in burnout recovery. Nobody should get to that point. And at the moment, my work is very much focused on burnout recovery, helping people to find their reason to breathe, but after we've helped them reset and recharge from burnout. The other mission, probably the bigger project in my life, was actually during that time in Vietnam. I was there in winter, and socks are like gold dust because they're never donated.
Oh.
So when you think of natural disasters happening, or even hurricanes, and people donating, people go with shelter and food and water, and actually in a lot of places, socks, hats have so much benefit to people. We would use socks for like 35 different things at the orphanage, and yet we didn't have any because nobody donates them.
Oh, wow.
And so I have a mission to put socks on the feet of 1 million forgotten children. So orphans, refugees, and those displaced by natural disasters.
Wow.
So
wow.
That's the passion project.
Something we don't think about, right? And yet I know, I live in Canada. It's cold for a good part of the year, and socks are critical. If your feet are warm, then your body can be warm. But if your feet are cold, it affects your kidneys, it affects your overall well-being, your overall body temperature in a way that you can't imagine. People who live in warm climates don't necessarily think about that, perhaps. And a lot of people probably think of Vietnam as being a warm place. So why would they need socks?
And so I'm from the UK. I'm pretty used to chilly winters, not Canada style winters, but it's around about 0 Celsius. But so go out to Vietnam, and I had been there in the summer, and it was like 50 degrees. So what's that? 50, 120. And I nearly died. Like, I was just so hot the whole time. And the Vietnamese barely sweat. They're like so used to those temperatures.
Yeah.
So then when I was there in the winter, and it's like, it's still 15 degrees, so 50 outside. That's like British spring summer. So I'm running around in short trousers, t-shirt, and the staff are wearing down jackets.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cold, I have to stay in front of the heater. It's like, it's 15 degrees. Like, it's fine. The children will not die outside in this temperature. But then it was like, no, it's now too cold for them to go outside unless they have socks or shoes. And actually, for a lot of them, a pair of socks means the flip-flops that they wore in the summer became their winter shoes, as long as they had a pair of socks.
Oh, okay.
So they don't need winter boots as such. So they still wear the same, plastic sort of sandal things, but with a pair of socks, they can go right through winter as well.
Oh, wow. So simple. Such a little thing makes such a big difference in their lives.
Absolutely.
I can tell that Neil's watching. There's just a Shin post. I love a good pair of warm socks. He also said, I love to dream. And for sure. So when we come back to that dream, the dream that you have of a million children having socks that wouldn't have had socks before, what does that do for you? What is the feeling that's attached to that?
Oh, it's that absolute, my heart starts to beat a little bit faster. My smile gets bigger. I dream so much bigger when I'm thinking about the socks. The first time somebody said to me, what's the number? You're like, well, 10,000. And it very soon became 1 million. And on, my left brain is going, where are we going to put 1 million pairs of socks, Sarah? And the other side is going, just imagine what we could do with 1 million pairs of socks. So yeah.
So the dreamer takes us beyond the reality kind of situation. It's really fascinating because I just had this whole episode this morning. I sat down to meditate, and an hour later, my brain is still giving me all the reasons why we can't do the thing that's in my mind that needs to be done. and I had this moment of, this is ridiculous. I just wasted an hour of my life that could have been used in some concrete way, struggling with the monkey mind. And bless my dear husband's heart, he's like, stop it, just stop it. And there are these moments when it feels like, but it's really taking over. And that's how we get into that place of being so wound up and burned out, right? Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do when, A, to help people recover from that, and B, to help prevent that? What do you suggest?
So I put together a breathe model. 7 things to think about. And the first one of those is to be present, in your surroundings where you are, and not be planning 10 minutes, 2 hours, 3 weeks, 4 months ahead of it. Just enjoy where you are. And a lot of the people that I work with have a more intimate relationship with their phone and their coffee machine than they do with their families. And it's like saying, you know what, just because that person emailed you now, you don't have to respond now.
Yeah.
So take 30 minutes for dinner, take an hour away from your phone, turn it off if you can, but just enjoy where you are and what you're doing. And even for those who don't have family or children, get a nice cup of coffee and go and sit somewhere and just take a few deep breaths, but move away from your laptop, move away from the things that are stressing you out, and just take a few minutes and say, okay, I'm breathing. Because that's a miracle in itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's true. Ultimately, that's what pulled me around, was remembering, okay, after this hour of torment, Like, stop it. Just be here now. You have to do something to become present. So for me, it was put on some music and move my body, get dancing, get that energy moving so that the brain isn't the all-consuming thing going on. And in that moving, everything calms down, all of that stops. And it's like, now I can think and feel beyond all of that monkey mind and go, okay. So instead of thinking about why this can't work, what can we do to make it work? It becomes an easier place really quickly when you can get that monkey mind aside. So,
and also using our body's own systems to help us with that. So even when I contacted my coach to say, will you help me? And when I did that, I didn't tell him what was really going on. I just told him I wanted to be a great speaker because I'd met him at a speaker training. And the first thing he had me do was write a list of things that used to make me happy, used to bring me joy. And he encouraged me to think about what I used to do as a child. And, I was a bookworm as a kid. If somebody said, write a book report, I'd written 5, I'd finished the library by the time I left the school. But in my room that night, I didn't have any books. I had that one book, his. And, the next weekend I went to the English bookshop in Hanoi and bought 7 books. And suddenly it was like reading was back in my life. I hadn't read a book for years. My camera came out of the case. I was taking photos again. I was seeing sunset. I was seeing sunrise. I started walking to the orphanage rather than just getting on the little moped taxi. All these things gave me 5 or 10 minutes where my brain just reset. It stopped producing cortisol, the stress hormone, and it was producing all the other happy hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. But those were allowing me to start the healing process.
Beautiful. Do what you love. Do what you love. And that brings.
And if you can't remember what you love, think about what you loved as a child, because you probably still love it.
It's one of the exercises that I often did in the women's retreats that I hosted. I would have them lay on the floor with some crayons and just depict the things that you love to do as a child. It doesn't matter that you're not an artist, they're just depictions. What are the things that you love to do? And women invariably would be sitting there with tears rolling down their face when we shared after. It's like, oh, I'd forgotten how much I love to swing, or I'd forgotten how much I love to color, or whatever it is, the simple little things in life that can bring us the joy. And it's those simple little things that keep us present, right? When time disappears,
you're
that
lost in. The 2 months afterwards, I would spend days at the orphanage coloring. I drew around my hand most days. Sometimes I was allowed to color in my own hand. Other times it was on a piece of paper that one of the children would take and color in. But, it was building Lego towers. It was, playing catch. These kids were, smiling most of the time. And I was like, oh my goodness, I had completely forgotten how much I just loved to color something in, or, fold a piece of paper and create a fan. None of these things are complicated or expensive. And they're all up here in memories, but it's just letting them out.
Yeah. Beautiful. Holy cow, 9:25 already. See, I told you that half hour.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So this is fabulous. Your story reminds us that no matter how rock bottom we hit, we can still come back when we find some reason to breathe. And that reason usually is outside of ourselves. It is about serving somebody in some way, yes?
Yes. Yeah.
And you've given us some tips for getting yourself out of the place of that horrible, like, be present, do the little things that you love. If there was one more message that you wanted to leave with our viewers, what would it be?
So I was at a business retreat a few weeks ago and had to kind of download was, we need to start treating ourselves with as much respect and care as we do our mobile phones. You know, our mobile phones, you know, that little red battery light comes on, and probably 95% of people or more will start running for the charger cable, the plug. Oh my goodness, my phone's going to die. And it's like, yeah, but what about you? When
Yeah.
your head's hurting, when you're tired, how soon will you start going, you know what, I need some rest. I need to hydrate. You know, people just don't do it.
Yes. Yes. So my focus is off you for in the moment, because I want to put on the screen your website so that if people want to reach you or communicate with you, you're just Sarah Ross on Facebook,
I am.
and your website is,
Website is yourreasontobreathe.com.
which I almost had typed in and I had to just double check and make sure. So there it is, Sarah
That's
Ross
the one.
on Facebook and yourreasontobreathe.com.
Yeah.
So what are people going to find there on your website?
So outline is part of the story that I shared with you today. We also have a quiz around, are you burning out? 15 different questions around things that, you know, may not be working in your life. Simple yes, no answers, but we'll give you an indicator of whether you need to, you know, just get a little bit of balance, or whether, you know, you need to start making some lifestyle changes. But you can sign up to that on the website. There's also a link to the book I was part of called Activate Your Life. And the exercise that we talked about there about finding your joy, finding your happiness is in that book.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful resource. And really wonderful getting to connect with you and hear this story firsthand. I read about it, but to actually hear it is like, wow. And it's so wonderful to see the joy that is in you now. Hard to imagine that you were at that point of wanting to take your own life when you see how joyful and full of life and appreciation you are now.
And it's so we used to once a week at the orphanage, we actually used to go to a temple, and there was a monk there, and she would feed us. You know, we would have a meal with her. And about 9 months after that day, she actually asked me what had changed, because my heart was full. And she said, when you were here last time, your heart was empty. She said, you didn't seem to be very happy. And so 9 months later, when I went and saw you, she said, what happened? Because your heart is full. And that to me was, you know, I think the first part, you're like, you know what, I'm in a good place, and you know, the people that I had met and what I had experienced, and the really, you know, when you put up the first time, even in the notes that it was Shin, that monk in Vietnam actually gave me monk's robes for a monk in Germany. And at the time I was living in Switzerland. I was a couple of minutes from the border, and so I could easily post these monk's robes to him, and his name was Shin.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Of course, the Japanese word Shin is heart and Tao is the way. So to be named Heart Way, wow, talk about talk about setting out a huge destiny. That's beautiful. Wow.
And Tao is actually the name of one of the very first orphans I met at the orphanage.
Wow.
A little girl and a little boy, and the little boy was called Tao. So yeah, so many little things.
Wow, profound. The little things can be really profound. And having a heart full comes from doing what brings you joy and finding a reason to breathe. So thank you for sharing that with us this morning, Sarah. It was a delight having you on this show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I invite our viewers to tune in next week when Asma Matab will be joining us. Her new reason to breathe. I keep wanting to say reason to breathe. Really interesting. I have to examine that one. Her reason to breathe is fire and flow. So stay tuned, join us next week. And again, thank you so much, Sarah. Keep doing the great work you're doing. And how do people help you reach that goal of 1 million socks? I should have asked that.
So we are actually in the moment where I'm having some conversations with the World Health Organization. So we will be doing probably GoFundMe to start with, but I will post the details once they're available.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Love you. Ciao for now.